Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. This happened about 3 months ago, and I still get angry thinking about it. I need to get this off my chest, and maybe some of you will find it entertaining. So I live in this old house that my grandfather built back in 1952. It sits on about 2 acres of land right next to what used to be farmland, but is now this fancy development with massive houses that all look exactly the same. My place is nothing special, just a simple 2-story house with white siding that could use a fresh coat of paint. The yard has some old oak trees and my grandfather's workshop that I converted into a garage. About 5 years ago, this developer bought all the land around me and built this luxury community. They have this strict HOA with all kinds of rules about what color you can paint your house, what kind of mailbox you can have, how tall your grass can be, all that nonsense. The thing is, my property predates all of this by decades. And when they built the development, they had to specifically exclude my land from the HOA because of something called a grandfather clause in my deed. The best part about my property is that I own this 10-foot wide strip of land that runs from my backyard straight through what is now the community park down to the lake. It cuts right through their perfectly manicured grass like a narrow corridor. At the end of this strip, right where it meets the water, I have my dock. It is not much to look at, just weathered wood that my grandfather built himself, but it is sturdy, and it has been there longer than most of the people in this neighborhood have been alive. The new neighbors have never been thrilled about my existence. My house does not fit their aesthetic vision of perfectly matching luxury homes with 3-car garages and circular driveways. I get dirty looks when I mow my lawn with my old push mower while they all have landscaping crews. My dock especially bothers them because it does not match the sleek new marina they built for themselves about 100 yards down the shoreline. The HOA social committee is run by this woman who I will call the social committee chair. She lives in the biggest house in the development, one of those McMansions with columns that serve no purpose except to look fancy. She has short blonde hair that always looks like she just left the salon, and she drives a white Lexus SUV that she parks diagonally across 2 spaces at the grocery store. You know the type. This woman has tried to get me to join the HOA voluntarily multiple times over the years. She would show up at my door with a clipboard and a fake smile, explaining how wonderful it would be if I participated in their community standards. I always politely declined and reminded her that my property is legally exempt. She would leave with that tight-lipped smile that said she was not giving up. The situation came to a head on a Saturday morning in early September. I had been planning this fishing trip for weeks. The weather was perfect. Cool morning air with no wind, and I had just gotten some new gear I was excited to try out. I loaded up my tackle box, grabbed my cooler with some drinks and sandwiches, and headed down the narrow path through the community park to my dock. As I got closer to the water, I could see that the social committee chair was hosting some kind of event on the grass near the lake. There were about 15 women in matching athletic wear doing yoga poses on purple mats. Someone had set up a table with mimosas and fancy-looking pastries. Classical music was playing from a Bluetooth speaker, and everyone was being very zen and peaceful. I tried to be quiet as I walked past them on my strip of land toward the dock. I really did not want to disturb their event, but as soon as I stepped onto the wooden planks of my dock, the social committee chair popped up from her downward dog pose like a jack-in-the-box. She marched over to me with that entitled stride that screams management material. The other yoga ladies stopped what they were doing and watched like this was better entertainment than their morning routine. The social committee chair planted herself right at the edge of my dock, blocking my path to the water. She told me that I needed to leave immediately. She said the HOA board had voted the night before to absorb all private waterfront structures into a unified community marina system. According to her, unauthorized individuals were no longer allowed to use community assets. She said my presence was disturbing their peaceful lakeside yoga and mimosa event, and I was scaring the other ladies. I set down my tackle box and looked at her calmly. I told her this was not community property and never had been. I explained that this dock was on my land and I had every legal right to use it. I had been fishing from this spot since I was 12 years old, long before any of these houses existed. She laughed at me. Actually laughed. She pointed to a brand new sign that had been hammered into the ground right next to my dock. It was one of those aluminum signs you can order online, white with blue lettering that said HOA members only. The thing was so new it still had the protective plastic film on one corner. She told me that sign had been installed that morning by official HOA vote, and anyone using the dock without permission would be considered trespassing. She called my dock a liability and an eyesore that brought down property values for the entire community. She said if I did not leave voluntarily, she would have to take further action. I looked at this woman standing there in her $100 yoga pants acting like she owned the lake, and something inside me shifted. I had been dealing with her passive-aggressive nonsense for years, but this was too much. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to take responsibility for what happened next. That question seemed to flip a switch in her brain. Her face went red, and she started yelling about how I was threatening her. She said she was calling the police to have me trespassed from community property. She was practically screaming that she would not be intimidated by some creepy guy who refused to follow neighborhood standards. I sat down on my cooler, pulled out my phone, and told her to please go ahead and call the police. I said it would save me a trip to the precinct later. That seemed to confuse her for a second, but she was too worked up to think about what I meant. While she was dialing 911, she started gathering her yoga friends around like they were her personal jury. She began filming me with her phone, narrating to what she claimed were her social media followers about this creepy squatter who was trying to ruin their neighborhood event. She was talking to her phone screen like she was some kind of influencer, describing how I was harassing innocent women who just wanted to enjoy their community amenities. The other ladies were eating this up. They started taking their own videos and photos, all talking about what a problem I was and how scary it must be to have someone like me living so close to their beautiful community. A couple of them were Googling property laws on their phones and discussing whether citizens' arrests were legal in our state. Then, the social committee chair decided to escalate things even further. She walked over to where my small fishing boat was tied to the dock and announced that she was impounding it for the HOA pending resolution of the trespassing issue. I warned her not to touch my boat. I told her specifically that if she touched that mooring line, she would be tampering with private maritime property. She looked right at me and laughed. She said I was just trying to scare her with fake legal threats. Then she reached down and unclipped the rope that held my boat to the dock. The boat immediately started drifting away from the shore with the gentle current. I had to jump into the shallow water to grab my boat before it floated too far out. The water was cold and came up to my knees, soaking my jeans and boots. The social committee chair and all her yoga friends thought this was hilarious. They were laughing and taking more videos of me standing in the lake water trying to pull my boat back to shore. By the time I got the boat secured again, I was dripping wet and pretty angry, but I also knew that the social committee chair had just made a huge mistake. I had been prepared for this confrontation for a long time, and she had just given me everything I needed. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. 2 officers in a patrol car parked near the community pavilion and walked over to see what the situation was. The social committee chair immediately went into victim mode, using that sweet voice that women like her perfect when they want sympathy from authority figures. She told the officers that I had been harassing her and the other women, that I was trespassing on HOA property, and that I had threatened her when she asked me to leave. She said I was some kind of weird loner who refused to follow community standards and was making the neighborhood unsafe for families. She pointed to the HOA members-only sign as proof that I had no right to be there. One of the officers, a middle-aged guy who looked like he had dealt with HOA disputes before, listened to her story with a neutral expression. Then he turned to me and asked for my side of what happened. I was still standing there dripping wet, but I stayed calm. I walked over to my tackle box and pulled out a laminated folder that I always kept with my fishing gear. I had been carrying those documents for 3 years, ever since the first time the social committee chair tried to claim my dock was community property. Inside that folder were copies of my original property deed from 1952, the land survey that showed my property boundaries, and documentation of my riparian rights. I handed the papers to the officer and explained that my property line extended all the way to the water and included exclusive use of the lake access. I showed him the original survey from when my grandfather bought the land, which clearly marked the 10-foot easement that ran through what was now the community park. I explained that this easement gave me a legal right-of-way to the lake that could not be blocked or claimed by anyone else. The officer studied the documents for several minutes while the social committee chair stood there tapping her foot impatiently. She kept saying that old papers did not matter and that HOA rules superseded everything else. She insisted that I was just trying to confuse the situation with fake legal documents. Then I pointed out something that made the officer look up sharply. I showed him that the HOA's new members-only sign was actually trespassing on my property. According to the survey, they had hammered that sign into the ground inside my property boundary. I also mentioned that I had security camera footage of the social committee chair deliberately setting my boat adrift, which could be considered vandalism or destruction of property. The officer walked over to look at the sign more closely, then came back to examine my documents again. His whole demeanor changed. He told the social committee chair to step back from the dock area and explained that she was not just wrong about the property ownership, but that she had committed several potential crimes. He said that by unmooring my boat, she had engaged in trespassing and reckless endangerment of property. If the boat had been damaged or lost, she could have been liable for replacement costs plus punitive damages. He also pointed out that installing the sign on my property without permission was another form of trespassing. The social committee chair completely lost it at this point. She started shrieking about how much she paid in HOA fees and property taxes. She said this was her neighborhood and she should not have to deal with people who refused to follow the rules. She demanded that the officer arrest me for harassment and intimidation. The officer told her to calm down or he would have to restrain her for disturbing the peace. That just made her angrier. She started yelling about how the police were supposed to protect decent people from troublemakers like me. She said she was going to call the mayor and the police chief and report the officer for not doing his job. At that point, the officer radioed for the HOA president to come down to the lake. Apparently, he wanted someone with actual authority to understand the legal situation before it got any worse. The president showed up about 15 minutes later, looking annoyed that his Saturday morning had been interrupted. The president was a tall guy in his 60s who had made his money in real estate development. He took one look at my documents and his face went completely white. He immediately understood the legal implications of what had happened. He realized that not only had the social committee chair been wrong about the property ownership, but that the HOA had potentially been charging the community for maintenance on a dock they did not even own. He pulled the social committee chair aside for a heated conversation that I could not quite hear, but it involved a lot of angry gestures and what looked like some very serious threats about legal liability. She kept pointing at me and arguing, but he was clearly shutting her down hard. The officer explained to both of them that I had exclusive riparian rights to my dock and lake access. He said these rights had been legally established decades before the HOA existed and could not be superseded by community rules or votes. He told them that interfering with my use of the dock could result in criminal charges as well as civil lawsuits. The HOA president apologized profusely and promised that the sign would be removed immediately. He said there had been a misunderstanding about property boundaries and that the HOA would take steps to ensure nothing like this happened again. He asked if I was planning to press charges for the boat incident. I told him I would consider my options and get back to him. I was not ready to make any decisions while I was still standing there soaking wet and angry. The officer gave me a case number and told me I could file a report later if I decided to pursue charges. The social committee chair was not ready to give up. She started arguing with the officer and the HOA president, insisting that old property lines did not matter and that community standards should override individual rights. She said people like me were what was wrong with America, refusing to participate in civilized society and contribute to community improvement. The officer had heard enough. He told her that if she did not stop interfering with my legal use of my property, he would arrest her for harassment and disturbing the peace. He said she had already committed enough potential crimes for one morning and should consider herself lucky that I had not demanded immediate prosecution. That finally shut her up, but I could see she was furious. She stormed off toward her house with her yoga friends trailing behind, all of them whispering and looking back at me like I was some kind of criminal who had gotten away with something. The HOA president stayed behind to do damage control. He asked me what it would take to resolve this situation without legal action. I told him I wanted 3 things. First, a written acknowledgement from the HOA that my dock was private property and that I had exclusive rights to use it. Second, reimbursement for the professional cleaning and detailing my boat would need after being set adrift in the lake. Third, removal of the social committee chair from any position where she could continue to harass me. He agreed to all 3 demands immediately. He said the HOA would pay for whatever boat maintenance was needed and that the social committee chair would be removed from her position pending a review of her conduct. He also promised a formal letter acknowledging my property rights that would be sent to every HOA member to prevent future misunderstandings. 2 weeks later, I received a check for $800 to cover the boat cleaning and detailing, along with a formal letter of apology on HOA letterhead. The letter specifically acknowledged my exclusive riparian rights and stated that the HOA had no authority over my dock or lake access. A copy was sent to every household in the development. The social committee chair was not just removed from her position, she was also hit with a special assessment to cover the legal fees the HOA had to pay their attorney to research the property rights issue and draft the formal acknowledgement. According to my neighbor who is married to someone on the HOA board, she had to pay over $3,000 in fees and legal costs. The best part is what happens now whenever I go fishing. As soon as the yoga ladies see me walking down to the dock, they pack up their mats and move their activities to the other side of the park. The social committee chair watches me from her upstairs balcony, but she does not come anywhere near the lake when I am there. She has to sit inside her expensive house and watch me enjoy the sunset from my weathered old dock that she tried so hard to steal. I still get dirty looks from some of the HOA members when I'm working in my yard or driving through the neighborhood, but nobody has tried to challenge my property rights since then. The new social committee chair actually waves when she sees me, probably because she does not want to deal with another expensive legal mess. The whole thing taught me that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies even when they think they have all the power. The social committee chair assumed that because I lived in an older house and did not follow HOA rules, I must not know my legal rights. She learned the hard way that my grandfather was smart enough to secure permanent access to the lake when he bought this land 70 years ago. I have thought about this incident a lot over the past few months. What bothers me most is not that she tried to ban me from my own dock, but that she was so confident she could get away with it. She really believed that her HOA authority and social status gave her the right to take whatever she wanted from someone she considered beneath her. The funny thing is that I probably would have been willing to work out some kind of sharing arrangement if she had approached me respectfully. I do not use the dock that much, maybe once or twice a week during fishing season, but instead of asking nicely, she decided to try intimidation and theft. That did not work out so well for her. I keep those property documents in my tackle box every time I go fishing now, just in case someone else decides to test my rights. But I think word has gotten around the neighborhood that messing with the old guy and his dock is not worth the trouble. The HOA president made it very clear to everyone that my property rights are not negotiable. The whole experience has actually made me appreciate my grandfather even more. He was a smart man who understood the value of waterfront access. When he bought this land in 1952, he made sure to secure permanent rights that could not be taken away by future development. He probably never imagined that his grandson would need those rights to fight off entitled HOA members, but his foresight saved me from losing something irreplaceable. I still live in my simple house with the white siding that needs paint, and I still mow my lawn with the same push mower that annoys my neighbors. But now, when I sit on my dock in the evening watching the sunset, I know that nobody can ever take this away from me. The social committee chair can watch from her balcony all she wants, but this little piece of paradise belongs to me. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I've worked in computer security for a very long time. A security policy that I'm sure most of the audience here is familiar with is that you always lock your computer when you walk away. Even if you're an accountant or receptionist, you just can't leave your machine unlocked ever. About 10 years ago, my team would have fun with this. If you ran to the bathroom or even had a conversation with your back turned, someone would sneak up to your computer and jump on the chat client or even email and say something silly or stupid like, "Does anyone know the meaning of life?" or some other random thing. A lot of the teams would do this and it was mostly harmless, but also was supposed to shame you into remembering to lock your computer before you walk away without reporting you to security for your formal reprimand, retraining, write-ups, like disciplinary action, job hunt. Everyone knew it was good-natured, and when the messages went out, everyone had a good laugh. One day a new guy shows up and he leaves his computer unattended. I introduce myself, shake his hand, chat him up a bit, and finally tell him he needs to lock his computer when he walks away. It's company policy. He probably ignored that in the training, but it's a big deal. Sent him the documentation because he thinks it's stupid. Again, we're in the security umbrella. He says, "Whatever." I shrug, walk away, and he walks away making a show of not locking his computer. He got multiple warnings over his first few weeks from his team and other, but was a complete butt about it. After a while, the team decides he's had enough warnings and started being granted access to sensitive stuff, and so he was fair game. Not long after, I walked by him on his way to the elevator atrium, so I know he's going to be gone for a while. I sit down, find his email client, and type out a silly message to his team's DL and hit send. As I'm standing up, he's walking back. He finds me and demands to know what I was doing. I shrug, say whatever, and walk away. Later that day, his manager walks up and tells me that he explained the situation to his new employee, and that the new guy didn't want to play that game, and was considering reporting me to security for impersonating him. Really? Okay, no problem, Mr. Manager. We were on very good terms. We will not play the game with your newbie. I will follow standard procedures. I got my team and a few others on chat to tell them that under no circumstances should anybody fire a message from him when they saw his computer unlocked. No shame reminders for newbie. Just follow the standard procedure. Almost 50 security violation tickets were logged in the next 2 days. His desk happened to be closer to the elevator atrium, break room, and bathroom, so a lot of normal traffic. He was in security retraining the following Monday. We were in an open floor plan, and I could see how mad he was talking to his manager and gesturing in my direction quite a bit. Not my fault, I had only opened 2 tickets. His manager asked me to let up. Sorry, just following standard procedure. If I don't report these violations, I'm liable. Dude's computer was locked for the rest of that Monday only. The following day, as I walked by, there was his email for all eyes to see and newbie nowhere to be found. He happened to be getting coffee, which was my destination as well, and I noticed he forgot to lock his computer. He cussed me out and speed walked back. The damage was done. He'd already had a dozen tickets opened by others, and the security policy had changed at some point. Now it was a quick retraining, then straight to disciplinary action. No write-up. He had to attend a meeting with his boss, director, and some security folks. I would find out much later that he got put on a security-related PIP. He was gone in a week. No one was out to ruin anyone's career here, but if you want to work in security and flagrantly violate policy because, I don't know why, well, you don't belong there. The next one is an entitled people story. It is absolutely disturbing what customers will attempt to return with no shame, regardless of how disgusting it is. This story took place in the early 2000s when I was working as a manager at a surf skate clothing store in a very large mall. This particularly feral type of Karen came barreling into my store and barged right up to the counter, cutting in front of 2 other customers who were next. We were off to a great start. Immediately, I attempted to tell her that there were 2 customers ahead of her in line, but before I can finish the sentence, she slammed a nasty-looking bag down on the counter and loudly demanded a refund. This B-dye Barracuda was going to be a problem right off the rip. Much to my own dismay, I opened the bag, an inside-out bag from another retailer. To this day, I can still smell the vile stench, which resembled a rotting egg salad sandwich on a hot garbage truck. I stifled my gag reflex and looked in the bag. The visual terror was as bad as the nasal assault that I had suffered. Inside the bag, I see a crumpled, faded, stained bathing suit that has been through some horrible spring break celebration in a landfill or pool party and sewage treatment plant. It was the end of September, so clearly this unfortunate garment had been used all summer, and now Krusty Cabana Karen wants her money back. We don't rent bathing suits, we sell them. You took it home, you removed all the tags, you subjected it to unspeakable horrors for months, and now you want me to refund you? NOPE! For those of you who have never worked retail, all bathing suits are a final sale. We verbally informed the customers that once the tags are off and the protective liner has been removed from the bikini bottom, you own it. No exceptions. State Health Code dictated that the suit was not able to be restocked on the sales floor. We also used a yellow highlighter on the customer's receipt to reinforce the policy, along with initialing their receipt with a permanent marker to signify that an associate has gone through the whole spiel with the bathing suit policy. On to the juicy part of the story. I turned the bag upside down while trying not to vomit up my lunch, and the tattered carcass fell onto the counter along with an equally ragged receipt. And yup, it was purchased in May. Again, it was now the end of September. This kumquat used the hell out of the suit for the entire summer. I used the bag, like one does when picking up a dog turd, scooped up the vile rag and receipt, and refused to return. The gates of hell blew open and Biohazard Barbie screamed at me with the raging aggression of 1,000 pissed-off badgers. She was not leaving until she gets her effing money. She's gonna call corporate. She's gonna call my district manager, blah blah. So I got real with her and told her, 1. Lower your voice and stop cursing. 2. I am the manager. 3. Even if this was a returnable garment, it's well past the 60-day return policy. 4. The top and bottom of the suit are covered in sweat, makeup, deodorant, skid marks, and what looked like Aunt Rose from Red Creek had stopped by unexpectedly. 5. I informed her that the garment was a swirling vortex of devil's lettuce smoke, perfume, fast food, and possibly dog farts. 6. And most important, the return was not happening under any circumstances. Please take the bag of projectile puke-inducing nightmares and exit the store immediately before security has to be called. Kaboom! Beach Barf Karen erupted and screeched at Howler Monkey frequency while simultaneously threatening to end my existence, burn my store down, get me fired, etc. Luckily, the mall had its own police substation, and my assistant had already called them once the threat started. She refused to leave and continued to escalate by trying to physically grab me by my name tag lanyard, which was around my neck. Just as she lunged at me, two police officers ran into the store and grabbed her by her hoodie, resulting in me having a broken name tag and red welt on my neck. She had officially assaulted me in front of the police, but wait, it gets even better. Somehow, this ferocious Karen had more rage to unleash and thought that it would be a good idea to be combative with the cops and push an entire rack of sunglasses over. When they tried to arrest her, she went limp and dropped on the ground, yes, like a giant toddler. She refused to get up and walk out like an adult. No problem. Two more officers showed up and zip-tied her kicking feet, then the four cops dragged her out riot style. The whole way out, Ballistic Bikini Karen was screaming obscenities, death threats, and loony gibberish. Yes, I pressed charges for the assault. Yes! The police added disturbing the peace, destruction of property, trespassing, and assaulting a police officer. She earned a permanent ban from all stores in our company and a minimum 2-year ban from the entire mall. Hardly seems worth it for a $50 bathing suit. The next one is an entitled parent story. This is really a vent, but I also open to hearing experiences and some consolation and advice on how to move forward. I'm at a point where I'm considering going even lower contact than I already have been. In the past, I would go to her for so much life advice and really permission because I felt like I had to get her approval in order to do anything. When I became an adult and moved away from home out of state, I began to see the error of my ways and scale back on depending on her for everything. Then got married, and now just recently had my first child, as of 8 weeks ago. We've had conversations since I've been married about my upbringing and how I want to be treated. Like not giving unsolicited advice, asserting her opinion even when I tell her I'm going my own way, venting about her marital, financial, and familial problems to me, and not listening to me when I speak, interrupting me and going on and on about what she thinks. Because of these things, I chose to go low contact with her, but my husband's mom just passed away and she came into town to provide help with the new baby during the funeral and to voluntarily support around our house. I would like her to have a relationship with our daughter if possible. She is ecstatic about being a grandmother, but does things without considering how my husband and I want them done. She is also quite lonely and does things that signal that she wants connection, but in a needy way, such as telling me that she feels left out when my husband and I are having conversations about people in the car with her and not telling her who they are, although we include her in conversations about people while we are in the car to help her feel included. She says that we are supposed to treat guests a certain way. In our most recent conversation, I laid out a couple of concerns that I had and my boundaries for them and the consequences. These things were that when she came to help our daughter during my Mills funeral, we needed her to drive our car with our daughter in because we can't take the car seat in the van the funeral home provided, and my husband and I wanted to ride with his immediate family there. She made a poor decision to feed our daughter while she was driving to our destination and told me that she had to do it because she was screaming, and that she said I told her that I didn't want our daughter screaming in the car. I then told her I never told her that directly, and that idea never should have applied to this situation, plus that was extremely unsafe and to not do it again. She replied with something she always says, I know, I just had to do it, but I won't do it again. I insisted that she not do it again, or that will sever our relationship. She said she would not do it again, but that she had to do it in this instance. I also brought up that we didn't appreciate her not asking how we would like things done around our house and just using whatever she could find to clean our floors, which ended in her throwing away a towel that was not meant for that purpose because she didn't know where the Swiffer pads were. I told her to just ask if she doesn't know where things are, and she said she knows, but she, again, had to do it, but that it won't happen again. I told her you didn't have to do it, you just chose to, and to not do it again. She starts to tell me that she has issues with accepting the way we do things in our house because she feels like she can't be the mom she's always been for me, and that she feels like we don't need her and starts crying, but that she'll do what we ask. But then, after I end the conversation, she called me back to say that she hopes I would use wisdom in discussing our conversation with my husband because she doesn't know me and wants my husband to have a good view of her. I told her that how I speak about this conversation to my husband is not her area to control, and she didn't like that. Then I dismiss us both off the phone because it begins to drag on as usual with her rebuttals. Afterwards, she apologizes, but tries to slick guilt trip me afterwards by sending this message. I want you to know that I love you and don't want any reserved feelings of contention between us or M. There's a lot of growth and introspection that I must work harder on. These things may take more grace than you are willing to give. I appreciate you bringing these concerns to my attention, and I will respect your space and flow. My husband and I have noticed that she struggles with just accepting responsibility for her actions and leaving it at that because somehow it always comes back to me not being willing to give her the grace she needs and that I need to understand her feelings as a mother. I didn't know that telling someone that we don't use towels to mop the floor and then throwing them away because we have Swiffer pads would lead to such a meltdown and identity crisis. We just don't want her to try to figure things out on her own when we already have a system going, not undermine her mothering. And we would like to stop the guilt trips after boundaries are set as well. Is the next step even lower contact or no contact? What would you do in this situation? Anyway, thank you for watching.